The Amazon rainforest is our Earth's largest remaining rainforest. Scientists tell us that just the existence of these trees is crucial to our planet's ability to withstand rising global temperatures. Crucial to our planet's water cycle, with its production of rain, cloud vapor, and 20% of the Earth's fresh water. And critical to stabilizing the levels of carbon and oxygen in our atmosphere. The rainforest has become a global symbol for species and habitat protection. No one questions that every year more trees are being cut and burned, and more rivers are being mined and dammed. The question is, when will be the tipping point for the ecology? Economics is driving deforestation and mining, and with 25 million people living in Amazonia, even conservationists will agree that some form of industry is necessary. But are there industries that can extract resources in ways that are sustainable? The trade in wild-caught tropical fish has been a source of revenue for river communities for almost 60 years. One example among several of traditional rainforest industries in the Amazon region. But even though there's a strong demand in the international aquarium market for these unique species, the fishery has been in a state of near collapse for over 10 years. And now animal rights activists are working to ban the wild-caught aquarium fish trade throughout the world. What would be the impact in Amazonia? Is this trade harmful to aquatic habitats and species? Or does the aquarium trade benefit conservation efforts in the Amazon region? Let's investigate.
Why is the Amazon jungle so important? Well, it is essential for the well-being of the planet. Being the largest contiguous forest in the world, it supplies 20% of the oxygen. In addition to that, it is the largest contiguous river system in the world, accounting for 20% of the fresh water flowing in the world. It contains 33% of all of the plant and animal species. A third of the world's species actually live and belong in the Amazon jungle.
The forest that we know today has been through many glaciations, and it has been essentially either wiped out or left very thin, and it has recovered. The problem is not necessarily with the disturbance. Blowdowns occur in the Amazon which can destroy hundreds of square kilometres at a time, but the forest recovers because you don't have people going in there afterwards setting fires, cutting down the remaining trees and planting crops. There is a very strong link between activities of humans and any sort of disturbance that will happen. Humans are now invading most of the Amazon, and every chance they get to cut and burn, they will. If we have enough of the Amazon protected from cutting and burning, it's very likely that we'll be able to sustain the water cycle.
An old mature tree in the Amazon jungle through its lifetime produces 25 million gallons of water back up into the atmosphere. That cycle of rain, and assume that there is approximately 400 million trees at 25 million gallons each, stabilizes the moisture in the entire atmosphere.
Satellite research has been monitoring the rate of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. It's estimated that in the last 50 years, about 1/5, or 300,000 square miles of forest has been cleared. In 2019, forest fires in Amazonia attracted global attention and controversy. The Brazilian Space Agency, which monitors deforestation, estimated that forest fires increased by 80% over the previous year. Each year, farmers regularly burn on their properties to prepare the land for new planting. These fires can rage out of control and burn large areas of forest. Opportunistic farmers can then move in to illegally cultivate and expand their soy plantations and cattle ranches. Beef and soy are Brazil's largest exports, and international investment and demand is helping to drive production.
The rainforest and the trees and the plant life in the Amazon is being called the lungs of the world, given that it provides 20% of the oxygen. In a similar parody, look at the river system of the Amazon jungle. We can pretty much refer to it as the veins of the earth. It's a circulatory system without which there would be no life. To the extent that we compromise the flowing of those rivers and the water availability of those rivers, is equivalent to putting ourselves at a risk of a stroke. Unfortunately, we're constantly doing that with dams, with mining, with deforestation.
The forecast is that legal and illegal deforestation will increase in the coming years. Brazil is suffering a prolonged economic crisis. In search of desperately needed revenue, the Brazilian government supports permitting new agriculture and mining initiatives in protected reserves within the forest. These plans are controversial and have become the focus of debate and criticism from politicians and conservationists internationally. The Brazilian government considers this criticism disrespectful to their sovereignty. They resist the notion that Amazonia belongs to the planet. The government insists that many of the nations that are critical to the opening of Amazonia to agriculture and mining have already deforested their lands and are therefore hypocrites. But what may be overlooked here is there are traditional industries that do not result in the destruction of the rainforest. Industries which can harvest sustainably without depleting the very resources that are being monetized or negatively impact the forest and aquatic habitats.
The principal extractive industries in the Amazon are the acai palm and the Brazil nut. Other industries such as fruits or the ornamental fish produce a much smaller amount of overall money for the economy, but they are the most important sources of income for most of the people in the Amazon outside of the city of Manaus.
A gente tem alguns ambientes principais na Amazônia. A gente tem a grande calha do rio Solimões, Amazonas, um grande rio de planície com águas barrentas e mais ou menos lentas, que tem um tipo de fauna de peixes. A gente tem os grandes maciços montanhosos, os escudos do Brasil Central e das Guianas, são rios de águas claras, com cachoeiras, que tem outros tipos de peixes, né? E temos a grande bacia do Rio Negro, que também é de planície, mas de águas pretas, muito ácidas, que restringem a entrada de outras espécies de peixes que não estão adaptados a essas condições.
The source of the Rio Negro is the Colombian Amazon, and as it flows southeast, it forms the border with Venezuela, before entering Brazil and the lowland basin of the state of Amazonas. The journey ends where the Rio Negro meets the Solimões. This is the confluence of the mighty Amazon River, known as the Meeting of the Waters. Manaus, the state capital of Amazonas, sits on the last stretches of the northern bank of the Rio Negro.
O Rio Negro é uma das bacias melhor preservadas da Amazônia e certamente do planeta, né? É uma bacia que não tem uma vocação importante para a agricultura por causa da grande área inundada que ela tem sazonalmente, e a floresta é muito bem preservada por esse motivo. O Rio Negro, todos os afluentes do Rio Negro nascem na própria floresta. Então todos os ácidos úmicos do chão da floresta, das folhas, das árvores, carregam para a água e tingem a água nessa cor característica do Rio Negro. E essa água, que é bastante ácida por esse motivo, tem a sua fauna particular de peixe, né? Uma fauna endêmica do Rio Negro, bastante diferente de outras áreas.
O Rio Negro tem uma característica muito especial, que é uma riqueza de espécies muito elevada. Então a gente tem uma diversidade enorme de peixes num ambiente que supostamente é pobre em nutrientes, em alimento para os peixes. Então a gente tem muitas espécies, mas não muitos indivíduos de cada espécie, o que faz com que em qualquer local a gente tenha um conjunto de espécies muito distintas, né? Além disso, a água é transparente, apesar de ser preta, né? Como um chá. Então, o aspecto visual é muito importante, os peixes se reconhecem visualmente. Então, as características de cor e de forma, essas espécies são importantes para o reconhecimento entre si, para a reprodução e para a evolução. Então, do ponto de vista aquarista, né, você tem muitas espécies, uma variedade enorme, com formas e cores muito diferentes. Acho que isso torna a fauna de peixes do Rio Negro muito especial.
A atividade de pesca ornamental no Amazonas começa na década de 50. A partir de então começa uma busca pelos ornamentais do Rio Negro. Mas o ápice mesmo dessa captura acontece na década de 80 a 90, onde a gente chega a exportar mais de 40 milhões de peixes ornamentais.
The aquarium fish industry has been going on and has been very robust since the 1950s. It has brought in as much as 60% of the cash income to the region. Rural people with limited access to livelihoods have this resource. They have access to the global market.
And this is what is needed in our industry. We still need to collect wild fish. Why? Wild fish is a very good genetic resource for breeding in other countries. And second, it's a valuable product because it's a very low carbon dioxide product. It's not a CO2 product because it just consumes CO2 and helps to save our Earth. Breeding of fish, more likely, is producing CO2. You have to produce energy, you have to produce food, and you have to employ people who come with a car or a motorcycle. You have to heat the water or pump the water. Here the nature creates the fish.
It's pretty unique in the world, and of course the fish here, the cardinal tetra, is one of the most iconic tropical fish species of all time. Some of the most beautiful fish in the world come from the Rio Negro.
A gente não conhece ainda direito o tamanho da fauna de peixes da Amazônia. As estimativas variam de 4 a 8 mil espécies, dependendo de como a gente analisa. Tem muitas espécies em diferentes riachos, igarapés, bacias, que nós sabemos que estão lá. Temos alguns exemplares em coleções, em museus, mas ainda não são descritas, não tem nome. E tem outras tantas que são diferentes geneticamente. Hoje em dia a gente reconhece que, do ponto de vista genético, podem ser espécies distintas, mesmo quando por fora elas são parecidas. Aí esse número pode ser muito maior ainda. Então a diversidade é muito mal conhecida.
In the Brazilian Amazon, there are now approximately 725 wild-caught fish species that are approved for export. Fish from this region are amongst the most desired in the aquarium trade. Around the world, hobbyists and professionals recreate Amazon aquatic ecosystems in their homes, restaurants, public aquariums, and of course dentist offices.
When I was a kid, I bought an aquarium, but before I bought the aquarium, I took all my savings, the equivalent, let's say, of $10, 10 pesos. I went to the store and I spent 50 cents on the fish and $9.50 on the aquarium. And that entailed the tank, but it entailed the conditioners, the water treatments, the filters, the lights, all of the environment. And without even becoming aware or knowing what was happening, I became a conservationist because I didn't know objectively that in order to have a fish alive and healthy, all of the environment needed to be fine. And without knowing, when you raise yourself as a kid taking care of tropical fish, you become aware that there is no healthy fish without healthy environment. And so I really attribute that I became a conservationist exactly because I had a fish tank.
Eu não consigo lembrar de uma fase na minha vida pessoal onde eu não tivesse pelo menos um peixe dentro de um pote de vidro. Então isso faz parte da minha vida, é uma paixão que eu carrego desde criança. Então eu acho que o aquário e os peixes ornamentais têm um papel muito importante na valorização da vida pelas crianças, pelas pessoas, na percepção da diversidade, do valor das relações ecológicas, como funciona o ambiente aquático e os organismos aquáticos. Então acho que ele tem muito a ensinar para as pessoas, ensinam até mesmo o valor da vida e a morte, responsabilidade sobre a vida. Então acho que tem uma série de aspectos educativos muito importantes relacionados a aquários e peixes ornamentais.
Scattered along the Rio Negro are small family communities like Daraqua. For over 50 years, the capture of aquarium fish has been their primary source of income. There are no roads here this deep in the jungle. So the river is the lifeline. It provides food, transport, and livelihoods. Along this middle section of the Rio Negro, there are many species of fish which are collected for the aquarium trade. Daraqua has a tiny carbon footprint, and the families have learned to survive within the forest by living simply and relying on the resources that the river offers. Daraqua was first settled in the 1950s, but capturing aquarium fish was not the original intention.
Trabalhava em seringa, depois da seringa vinha a castanha, sova, tudo isso a gente trabalhava. Uma vez nós fomos para Piaçabal, ninguém nunca tinha ido, daí nós viemos para cá, pegamos aqui.
Antes morava mais mesmo, né, que quando, na época do meu pai, eles moravam mais gente, agora só está cadastrado mesmo aqui na comunidade, só tem 3 famílias.
Porque a gente trabalha com peixe ornamental e peixe comestível. Na cheia é peixe comestível, quando começa a secar que a gente começa a pescar o cardinal, né? Nosso trabalho é isso.
Na verdade, todo mundo aqui vive da pesca porque nós não temos um lugar aqui adequado para plantar, para criar, porque aqui é uma várzea, além de ser várzea, essa areia aí, ó, que não tem como a gente plantar. A pesca é uma das maiores coisas que temos aqui para poder vivermos dela.
To capture the fish that are in demand for the aquarium trade, it's necessary to travel deep into the streams that feed the Rio Negro. The fish collectors, known as piaberos, use primitive techniques to capture fish. Hand-carved wooden canoes and simple handheld nets. As the annual flood recedes in the dry season, the small streams evaporate and the fish are often captured in shallow pools just inches deep. The piaberos also use traps called kakui, which attract fish using bait. It's possible to capture over 2,000 fish a day using these techniques. Antonio is also a piabero. He works on another tributary of the Rio Negro called Zamula. By choice, he spends months alone out here in the dry season.
Aqui é muito bom aqui. Eu venho pra cá só eu e Deus. Fico sozinho aqui, pescando. Bora aí pra esse garapé aí. Eu desde 12 anos, pegando essas piabinhas. Agora eu tô com 62. Rodorte e cardinal, que eu pego mais. Agora diz que eu não pego, não. gosto muito do meu trabalho. Porque é muito bom. Então o cara pega a chuva e o bicho chega, fica tudo forte. Eita! Chega, toma um banho, almoça, não janta. O cara come bem. Bem mesmo. Só gosta assim da mata, assim, dos garapé. Tão bonito que eu tô sentado aqui, ó. Com o solzinho desse. Bom. Não é bom? É. Eu quero trabalhar mais 3 anos, aí pronto, aí eu vou parar. Aí eu vou parar e vou me aquietar.
Nobody understands the rhythms of the jungle better than Piaberos like Antonio. Living within this wilderness, he has learned to survive, primarily on fish. Fish to eat and fish to capture alive. Piaberos understand that the fish that they capture can only be found under thick forest canopy in uncontaminated streams. The trees provide shade, protection, and food. These fish would not survive in open clearings, out in the hot sun and more exposed to predators. Logging, mining, or burning trees not only destroys the forest and its diversity of plant and animal life, it destroys the aquatic ecosystem too. Deforestation can quickly end the Piabero's ability to make a living from the capture of aquarium fish.
Uma das características mais impressionantes da Amazônia é essa conexão entre o mundo aquático e o mundo terrestre. Essas florestas fornecem alimento diretamente para os peixes, na forma de frutos, sementes e até das folhas que caem, entram em processo de decomposição e são consumidas pelos peixes. A floresta também depende dos peixes. Boa parte da regeneração da floresta de água preta depende de peixes comerem sementes e frutos, digerirem essa matéria e depositarem as sementes em outros locais. Ou seja, é uma interação de fato entre peixes e floresta que não ocorre em nenhuma outra parte do mundo.
O cara corta, né? Vai limpando e ele vai embora. Vai embora, ele não vem mais para ali mais não. Já vamos procurar outro cerradal. Que o peixe eu gosto só do cerrado. Do limpo não gosta não. Só mesmo no meio da casa galhada. O cara sai rasgando mesmo, mata por aí, vai embora. Atrás dele, por aí, para procurar. Senão não encontra.
Quem está pescando peixe ornamental sabe da importância da qualidade do ambiente bem preservada para a manutenção dos peixes, da saúde da população de peixe que eles pescam.
If these forests are cut down, they're burnt, they're converted to agriculture or cattle ranching, then the increased sedimentation, that is the soil runoff that was being retained by the forest that then runs into these stream banks, will damage the fishery. The community's livelihoods will be ruined and they'll need to seek other alternatives to put food on the table for their families.
Enquanto os piabeiros estão coletando peixes, eles não estão plantando ou criando gado ou minerando ou tendo qualquer outra atividade mais prejudicial ao meio ambiente.
I am concerned with the long-term impacts if communities like this aren't able to continue to sell fish. They will have to shift to other types of livelihoods, and here there aren't a lot of options. There isn't a lot of access to education or other careers. Some of the things that have not been taking place in this region might crop up.
Dá para perceber que a atividade, em relação às pesquisas que nós temos, que a atividade ela é sustentável. Dá para você fazer uma parte econômica com que o pescador consiga comercializar esse peixe por um preço justo e consiga trazer benefícios para sua família, a questão social.
Piaberos make a livelihood out of catching wild tropical fish. If the Piaberos didn't do that in a sustainable way, they would actually be done in a season. They need to make sure that the tropical fish that they actually catch and send to the ornamental trade are abundant and come back every year. So they self-regulate in a way so that they don't end up killing the golden goose. They actually need the healthy tropical forest in every possible way in order to make their livelihood. In so many ways, they are truly guardians of the specific ecosystems where they actually act.
The Rio Negro Basin is often referred to as a flooded forest ecosystem. The natural annual cycle of flood and drought is normal and predictable. During the extreme low water season, soil is exposed and the high water marks are visible on the trees. At Daraqua, a large sandy beach offers plenty of real estate to work and play. The houses, perched on the highest ground, sit on stilts. The rainy season arrives in January. Daily torrential downpours over the next 4 months is typical. Hours pass as sheets of rain unloads from the sky, and the Rio Negro Basin begins to fill with rainwater. By March, the river slowly begins to creep up the beach at Daraqua. Gradually, more and more territory is lost as the river swells. Finally, the river reaches to the houses and begins to creep up to the second floor. Normally, by the middle of July, the river crests and the basin is full. The river has engulfed all dry land and has penetrated hundreds of miles into the forest.
Here in the Amazon, there's dramatic fluctuations between the high water season and the low water season, and life here has adapted to that. And how many of the fish have adapted to that is they have a boom and bust cycle. In the low water season, it is very challenging conditions, and in fact, many fish populations go into decline and just have a fraction, a small percentage of what they were at their peak.
A população de cardinais no Rio Negro é absurdamente grande. São milhões e milhões e milhões de peixes que têm um ciclo de vida bastante curto, talvez de 2 anos, e que na estação da seca eles vão naturalmente morrer, aos muitos milhões vão morrer.
Nós podemos observar que na seca ele vai morrer bastante, sim, por causa da questão de temperatura, que é muito alto mesmo. A gente vai ter pouco ambiente e os predadores são maiores.
O jacaré é danado para comer. Um peixezinho que tem assim. E aqueles cardumes bate toc.
Normally by November, the Rio Negro will once again dry to its lowest level. The aquatic world has adapted to this predictable cycle of high and low water. Flooding allows the surviving fish to escape the small streams, and they move deeper into the forest for protection and to breed.
Então, no período da enchente, essas áreas que a gente chama de áreas interfluviais, que significa entre rios, são áreas baixas e que só alagam quando a água está na enchente. É nesses locais que os cardinais reproduzem. Então eles dependem que a água tenha subido até um certo nível para que eles possam ter acesso a esse tipo de ambiente. São áreas rasas e onde não há muitos peixes. Então eles conseguem se reproduzir e os filhotes sobrevivem bem. E tem que sair antes que ele seque completamente, porque senão os filhotes morrem. Então existe um sincronismo de movimentos acompanhando a enchente e a vazante para que essa reprodução tenha sucesso.
As the dry season returns, the water level drops and the fish once again are forced to become concentrated into the streams. Once again more accessible to predators and the piaberos.
Volta, mas esse que a gente pega não volta mais não. Não volta mais não. Agora tem os filhinhos, aí já vão produzir de novo, né? Já vão produzir de novo.
Populations just bounce right back to what they had been, and that's an indication that these fish species and populations are quite stable, and the natural cycles allow for this annual offtake.
Normalmente, o tempo de vida de uma determinada espécie de peixe está diretamente relacionado com o tamanho. Quanto menor o peixe, menor o tempo de vida. Não é uma regra fixa exata, mas peixes pequenininhos de 2 ou 3 centímetros normalmente vivem 2, 3 anos, 4 anos, pelo menos na natureza. Em aquários, sob condições muito controladas, sem a morte por predadores, essa vida pode se estender para 5, 6 anos.
With the flooding of the rainforest, the number of fish expands exponentially, but when the water level drops, a large number of those fish don't survive because there isn't enough resources for them anymore. And so those fish essentially would die. So by collecting them at that peak, you're actually taking them from an area where they would die in the wild and putting them into a home aquarium where they have a chance to live for many more years.
What's nice about this fishery is it's been studied since the late 80s, and there's just reams of research on it that have pretty consistently shown that this fishery is not only not causing depletion of the species that are being pulled out of here, but it's actually having a positive benefit on the environment.
The fish that are collected in the streams that feed the Rio Negro will travel long distances and pass through many hands before they reach their final destination, the home aquarium. On their journey, they will be transported by boats, airplanes, trucks, and cars. But first, the fish which have been held in small pens must be separated and counted. A larger boat is needed to carry the many thousands of fish in hundreds of heavy water-filled plastic containers. Today on board will be primarily discus, cardinal tetras, and rummy-nosed tetras. Small numbers of some more unusual varieties, like these leaf fish, will also be brought to market. Once the Piaberos have loaded all their live cargo, they're ready to take the 4-hour trip to the city of Barcelos, the regional hub for the aquarium fish trade. This is the first of many transports these fish will endure on their way to home aquariums in Europe, Asia, and North America. With a heavy cargo of mostly water, it's slow going for the diesel-powered wooden boat. By mid-afternoon, Barcelos finally comes into sight, and the first leg of the fish's journey comes to an end. Barcelos sits on the bank of the middle Rio Negro. Its population is about 25,000 people. The city was founded by Portuguese colonists in 1758 and was the original state capital of Amazonas.
A cidade de Barcelos é o principal local de comércio dos peixes ornamentais do Rio Negro. Ali todos os peixes que são capturados na área do médio Rio Negro, por exemplo, da cidade de Santa Isabel, no interior da cidade de Barcelos também, de diferentes tributários, são levados para serem entregados aos intermediários ou atravessadores da cidade. Esses atravessadores, posteriormente, vão fazer a ponte com os exportadores que ficam na cidade de Manaus. Do outro lado do rio, os peixes ornamentais são estocados pelos atravessadores dentro de tanques rede construídos na superfície do rio. São sistemas que flutuam na água São dispositivos muito simples que permitem eles acumular diferentes tipos de peixe até completar um pedido específico que vai ser enviado posteriormente para os exportadores.
Na década de 80, né, que estava no auge, foi o topo ali dessa cadeia produtiva, Barcelos praticamente empregava 10 mil famílias, todo mundo envolvido com a pesca, e era muito bom. Todo mundo tinha seu dinheiro, né? Viviam bem, conseguiram, muitos construíram uma casa, melhoraram o seu sistema de vida.
Aquarium fish have become an important part of the culture here, and every year they're celebrated at the Festival of Ornamental Fish.
Festival, são dois peixes, né? O cardinal e o acaradisco. O cardinal, ele representa as cores vermelho e azul, e o acaradisco preto e amarelo. São duas agremiações diferentes. Tenho orgulho de ser barcelense, de ter nascido em uma cidade como Barcelos, que hoje a nossa cultura é uma das coisas que se tornou Barcelos conhecido no mundo inteiro. E hoje nós temos que ter orgulho de ser barcelense.
Natal, the public ferry boat, has arrived in Barcelos. It carries cargo and passengers downriver to Manaus. Today, the cargo will include hundreds of thousands of wild-caught aquarium fish. First, it's necessary to prepare the fish for their journey. At the holding stations on the opposite bank of the river, the intermediaries are hard at work doing a final water change for each plastic container. 2 hours before the ferry's departure, the fish are brought across the river to be loaded on board. A large section of the lower deck will be filled by hundreds of containers with fish. The journey will take about 24 hours, and during that period there'll be no water changes or feeding for the fish. Finally, the ferry begins its journey downriver, along with its cargo of hundreds of thousands of live aquarium fish. It's the next phase in a complicated process of bringing these Amazonian fish species to the marketplace.